Hi, I'm Rachel, the Digital Marketing Manager at Charlesbridge, and I am so glad to be with you today, joined by the incredible creators of the book Turtles Heading Home and a couple of real life rescuers who helped make it all possible. Turtles Heading Home is an inspiring success story that follows the efforts of conservationists as they rescue Kemp's Ridley sea turtles around the waters of Cape Cod, nurse them back to health, and release them into warmer waters. To begin, I'd love it if each of you could briefly introduce yourself and share a bit of your background.
Thanks. I'm Liza Ketchum. I live in Watertown, Massachusetts, and this is the second of three books that Jackie and Phyllis and I have written together, and I'm a longtime author of children's books for middle grade readers, picture books, and young adults. And living in Watertown meant that I was able to witness and see the Turtles program up close, which is wonderful.
I'm Phyllis Root. What Liza said, this is the second of three books we've written together. It's been wonderful to be learning about the turtles, wonderful to be writing with these two incredible authors. I'm a longtime author of children's picture books, but writing together has been a whole new delight.
I'm Jackie Briggs Martin, and I too have been writing children's books for some time now. I love writing children's books. I get to access that child that's still part of me. And I have loved writing with Phyllis and Liza. It is so much fun to be able to share the uncertainty of writing and the surprising new ideas of writing. This turtle book was so much fun to work on.
Hi, my name's Heather Pilchard, and I'm an artist who lives on Cape Cod. And in the winter months, November through the beginning of January, I volunteer at Mass Audubon rescuing cold-stunned sea turtles.
Hello, my name is Eamon Caffrey. I'm based in Wellfleet, Massachusetts, at Mass Audubon's Wellfleet Bay Wildlife Sanctuary, and I am the Turtle Research Coordinator. So in the winter, I am coordinating our cold stun sea turtle rescue program, which has been going on since around the 1970s. And it's a large volunteer effort with really, we act as the first responders to rescue Kemp's Ridley, loggerhead, and green sea turtles that have cold stunned along the bayside beaches of Cape Cod.
Wonderful. I am so excited to be having this conversation with you all. So, to kick things off, why don't we start with some fun facts about sea turtles? I'd love to hear one of your favorite or most surprising turtle facts. Heather, would you like to start?
Yes. Being a volunteer and working with these turtles, I was always curious about how these juvenile sea turtles ended up in our waters. And especially the Kemp Ridley sea turtles, which are one of the most endangered sea turtles in the world, we also rescue green sea turtles and loggerheads. But the Kemp Ridleys, they're born on beaches in Mexico, and then some of them actually stay in the Gulf of Mexico, but some of them actually ride the Gulf Stream all the way up to our beaches. And by the time they get to us, they're juvenile sea turtles. And I just found that fascinating.
The one cool thing about sea turtles specifically is that because they're a marine reptile and they're living in an environment with so much salinity, they have a special salt gland that's located behind their eye that they'll use to excrete the salt from the salt water so they can stay hydrated throughout their life, which is pretty cool. It's kind of interesting that it's behind their eyeball. That just seems like a weird place to have it.
Jackie, what about you?
Well, there's so much about turtles that's interesting, but I am actually at heart a foodie, and I was very interested to learn that in the rehab area, turtles' favorite food is squid. But squid is not the most nutritious food for them.
Mm.
So sometimes they take herring, which is more nutritious, and wrap it in squid so the turtles will eat it. And I think kids can relate to that because sometimes parents will do something similar to that.
Like cheese and broccoli. Yeah.
Right.
Phyllis, what about you?
Oh, there's so much. I really loved learning the things that we learned about them. One thing I was fascinated by was the Arabada, which is where so many turtles, thousands of turtles, come ashore at the same time to lay their eggs on those beaches in Mexico. And we came across some old film from the 40s, when the person discovered the site of the Arabada. No one knew about it before. And there's film of just all these turtles coming ashore. And the fact that they know to all do that at the same time is amazing to me.
Yeah, that sounds incredible. Liza.
Yes, when I started reading about Ridleys, I read that they have been around for between 2.5 and 3.5 million years, and that their common ancestor, I'm not sure, I guess with other turtles, is 110 million years old. So they're really ancient, and that makes me feel even better about all these people who are rescuing them and trying to keep them alive.
Absolutely. I hope our audience is ready to learn even more. So before we fully begin, I have a question for the audience watching. What do the turtles have to do before they get solid food? And if you listen closely, you might just hear the answer in the rest of our session. But we'll check back in near the end and see if you got it correct. And again, that question is, what do the turtles have to do before they get solid food? Now to jump back in, I would love to hear more about the Kemp's Ridley sea turtle and its role in the environment. So what makes this species, so unique and important? I know we've touched on a couple things, but I'd love to hear some more.
Well, I will start. Possibly one answer is we are still learning how so many creatures fit into the environment and what their role is. I know they've been around for a long time, and I know as we learn more about the web in the ocean, we will figure out. I know some turtles, the green turtles, eat seagrass and have an important role in the survival of seagrass. I think it will be interesting to learn more about what Kemp's Ridleys do. And just the fact that they've been around so long makes them important, I think.
Kemp's Ridley are a really important species because, a lot of sea turtles are omnivores, but they really, and especially in their juvenile stages, they'll be floating around with big clumps of sargasso seaweed, and they'll be feeding on snails and mollusks and vegetation and anything they can really get their mouths on. So it's really important in that sense, in terms of their diet. They're keeping certain mollusks in check, or certain species of aquatic vegetation. And then also, a lot of people don't really think about this, but when these turtles are nesting in Arabadas and they're laying so many eggs at one time, some of those eggs get predated. And while that's sad, and we want to conserve the species because it's endangered, it is providing an important food source for other species too.
Mm-hmm.
And even when those eggs hatch and the hatchlings are making their way to the water, other species of animals like shorebirds or gulls or whatnot are snatching up those hatchlings. And again, it is difficult to think about, but it is a whole food web interaction between they're keeping things in check by eating food in their juvenile and adult phases, and then they're providing food when they're small hatchlings or even before they've developed.
I would just say, too, I always come back to, I think it was Aldo Leopold who said the first rule of intelligent tinkering is to save all the pieces. It all is connected. We know they matter.
Thank you all for sharing that. It's just amazing to hear more about these creatures. And I'd love to dive a little deeper and hear from each of you personally. First, I'm going to start with our authors. What was your favorite part about making the book?
The book actually started because my husband, John, noticed this story in the Boston Globe about people who were rescuing sea turtles on the Cape, and he said, we got to go down and see this. Sounds like a great story. It was incredible to meet in person so many people who are part of this rescue program, including Heather, who took us on one of her beach walks. And the other thing that I love the most is just working collaboratively with Liz and Jackie. And this is our third, as I said, one of 3 books we've done together. So much fun.
Liza, you briefly mentioned visiting one of the beaches. Could you tell us more about that? What was it like visiting those beaches, the turtle rescue sites, while working on the book?
Yes, John and I walked the beaches with Bob Prescott, who was the first person to see one of these turtles on shore and wondering what it was doing there. And so we walked one of the beaches with him, didn't see any turtles washed ashore. And then Heather, I think you walked the beach with us. Again, we didn't see any turtles washed ashore, but you really explained the whole process. What struck me the most was that you talked about walking the beach at high tide in the middle of the night. That's really showed the dedication of everyone to this program, that, if high tide is at 2 a.m, that's, you have to get up in the middle of the night and see if the high tide left any turtles there.
Our last question for our authors is, what do you hope young readers will connect with this story?
Oh, so many things. I hope they learn about and learn to love the turtles the way that we did, to know about them. There's so much to learn. And then in the back of the book, there are things that people can do, not just to help the Kemps Ridleys, because most people like me live far from the ocean, things they can do to help with climate change, not using plastic straws, because there are ways that they damage the turtles that they get in the ocean, and the same with the helium balloons that are let loose. A lot of small things that people can do. And Jackie, you were going to talk about becoming an activist for turtles.
That is also in the back of the book. Becoming an activist, a turtle activist, is something we can all do. Learn more about turtles, tell our friends about turtles, and tell our friends what they can do. So that's one thing that I hope kids will get out of the book, is becoming a turtle activist. Another is, I have, as I said, been so impressed by the volunteers who help the turtles. And I love that idea of finding something you care about and giving your time as a gift. And kids can do that too. Give their time as a gift to something, some activity or creature or group that they care about.
Also, because climate change is causing the stranding of the turtles, it's important for kids and their parents to realize that everyone has a role in climate change and in trying to, alleviate, get rid of, or at least slow down what is happening to the planet. And so we do have a list of things that people can do at the back of the book.
That's a great transition to Heather. How did you decide to become a volunteer and help these sea turtles?
It begins with my love of all creatures. But oh my gosh, I jumped at the chance to interact with these rare sea turtles. During the releases, when we release them, it's like the turtles, after they've been rehabilitated, they rush to the ocean and make their way, and then they sort of are in the surf, and then all of a sudden they disappear. And it's so mysterious and magical. Sometimes I feel helpless, I feel like this is something I can do. And I also want to reiterate too, that I'm part of a huge network of people working to save these turtles. I'm just one person, but also just to know that there are other people out there with the same intention and compassion towards these creatures. It's just amazing.
And Heather, what you said about turtle release, you've seen them, you've been there, right?
Oh,
and
yes.
We saw this video where this turtle was it was being carried toward the ocean. It was already swimming. It was so
Mhm.
exciting
Mhm.
to hear the ocean. And that must just
Mm, mm.
give you joy.
It does. I mean, and also just the contrast, because when we find these cold stunned turtles on the beach, I mean, they look dead. They're just lifeless or barely moving. So then, after they've been rehabilitated, which to Liza's point, it's like there's all these different stages and organizations that help the turtles along the way. So after the New England Aquarium rehabilitates them, um, and like Liza was saying, some of them stay at the New England Aquarium. Some of them go to other facilities, in other states, and they're released on the ocean in these other states. But the ones that stay here, um, they do stage releases, and it's so wonderful. The volunteers who either drove a turtle in Massachusetts or um, found them on the beaches is invited to watch the releases, and it's so emotional. And one time, another volunteer and we got to carry the turtle to the water that we found on the beach. It was amazing. It was this
Oh,
huge loggerhead. Yeah, yeah. It gets me every time. There are a lot of memorable rescues. One of them in particular was a cold December night. It was really dark. It was around midnight, and my partner and we were walking on a Truro beach, which Truro, it's very remote. And so at night, it's so beautiful. You see all the stars, and it's so quiet on the beach. So we got there, and we were walking, and we glanced at the ocean, and we saw something really shadowy and huge in the waves. And we were like, "What is that?" Um, um, and so we kept walking, and we actually found 3 Kemp Ridleys. And then on our way back, as the surf receded, we realized it was a whale. It was this fin whale. We found out later it was named Ladders, that had died in October, and so it was decomposing. So it was very white and shadowy, and so when we called in our turtles, we were like, "Yes, we found 3 turtles and a whale." Um, so for the rest of the season, the bones had washed up onto the shore. The whale had washed up. So we would walk past this whale on that particular beach.
We can go to the next question for you, just walking us through a typical patrol.
I would say it first starts with the Audubon, the staff at the Audubon, because they assess the wind direction and make an assessment of what beaches need to be walked. So then we get a call. We need to be prepared. So we have to think about what clothing we're going to wear. The temperature can be anywhere from 50 degrees to like freezing. It's usually high winds, because it's the high winds that push the turtles on shore. We also wear backpacks that have towels. If it's at night, usually have 2 flashlights in case one stops working. Some people wear headlamps. You bring water and a snack. And another thing that's very important is to make sure your phone is charged. So we walk at the high tide. So we figure out exactly what time we're going to walk. There's other volunteers walking other beaches, and it's kind of fun at night, because you can see the flashlight of the other volunteers on the beaches further down or the other way. Sometimes the ocean brings in a lot of seaweed, and the turtles just blend right into the seaweed. So you have to really be concentrating. I've been out with people who've been talking, and they walked right past a turtle. So if you find a turtle, and for some reason I always yell out turtle, it's like a habit, then you wrap the turtle in a towel. And depending on how far you're walking, if you've just started your walk, you may put the turtle up past the high tide line and keep walking, because sometimes it can be like a 3-mile walk. And sometimes we carry sleds, and so you can put the turtle in the sled. The towel is to keep the wind off the turtle, because a lot of times actually the water is warmer than the air temperature. on the walk back, the tide has receded. We'll walk down by the water to make sure. We call them late drops, that the tide hasn't gone out and dropped the turtle later. And then all volunteers, they call the Audubon and let them know what you found. For those who have the experience, you can take the turtle and put them in banana boxes in your car. You're supposed to keep your car temperature at 50 degrees and not play any music. You go to the Audubon, and then the Audubon staff meets you and then takes your turtles. We also write on an index card the beach, time, our names, and the date. And then at the Audubon, which Eamon can talk more about that, they assign each turtle a number, and it gets processed. So that's my part.
That is very cool. And how many turtles do you find on a typical patrol?
It's like part of it. You can find none, or you could find, probably typical is maybe 3. And every year, I think, because of global warming, and we hope, because our conservation efforts are working on our end and also on the nesting end. I know nests are being protected too. Every year we find more turtles. So like a typical year between November and the beginning of January, like we'll find like 800 turtles.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
I remember one night, actually it was during the day and I was by myself. My partner, she had to go off Cape. It was very cold. I started walking and immediately I found like 7 turtles. And it was actually really overwhelming. So I called a friend and I asked for help. She was going to meet me at the end of the beach walk and then take the turtles. But then I got a call from the Audubon, and they said that the walker on the next beach, her dog got sick. She wasn't able to do her beach. So I had to walk another beach. And I think that time I found like 20 turtles. It was really an incredible experience. But as soon as I knew I had help, that's another thing about volunteering and the Audubon. The Audubon is such a wonderful organization to volunteer for because you are supported.
What happens to the turtle after it's rescued?
When a volunteer like Heather rescues a turtle, depending on the scenario, it sort of varies whether we're super swamped. We might ask that volunteer to drive the turtle into us here at the sanctuary in Wellfleet, or most of the time, staff is driving one of our 2 rescue vans to the beach location and picking up a certain number of turtles, however many sort of show up during that tide. It'll go in the rescue van. The van is set at 55 degrees just to keep sort of that stable temperature because it can actually be counterintuitive to warm the turtle up too quickly. And then we'll drive it back to our processing lab, which is also at 55 degrees. We're taking measurements, we're taking photos, we're scanning the turtles for a pit tag, which is a little microchip. That's a way to tell if that turtle has been seen at any other, location or whatnot. And we do get like maybe 1 or 2 that have stranded previously, but generally most of them are not coming back up north after they've stranded. And so once we do sort of the basics in terms of processing, we're really just temperature stabilizing them. They're not swimming or going in water or anything. We're just placing them. Most of the turtles are juvenile Kemp's Ridleys, so they're about the size of a dinner plate. So they fit very nicely in a banana box. So we'll put a towel in the banana box. The turtle goes in that banana box and it's nice and sort of compact in there and good to transport. And then we do 2 transports a day, one at 9 in the morning and one at 1 in the afternoon, driving these turtles twice a day up to the Quincy Sea Turtle Hospital that's run by the New England Aquarium. It's a separate warehouse from the actual aquarium. It's basically just a building that's designed to do the actual veterinary work and rehab on these turtles. So when they're getting the turtles in, they're assessing them because they're cold stunned. They're really at the will of the wind and the tide. So sometimes they'll get bashed into rocks and jetties and stuff, and they'll have big lacerations on their skin or necrotic tissue or whatnot. So the turtles with critical injuries will be sort of assessed first, and they'll go off of that. But they're giving them fluids, they're taking measurements as well. And then the process is sort of a slow acclimation to water. They're increasing the water temp by 5-degree intervals until they get them up to 70 degrees. And then the one thing they're really looking for before they give them solid food is if their digestive tract is working and if the turtle is pooping, basically. And once a turtle poops, then they'll give them solid food. And that's really a good sign to know that that turtle is probably going to be okay to be flown to another facility after that. The turtles that are more critical will stay at the aquarium for most of the winter and the spring, and then they get released off West Dennis Beach the following summer. But that's a small number of them. Most of these turtles are being, once they're stabilized and ready to be flown, they're being flown to other aquariums across the East Coast in Florida and Georgia and a lot of states in between. And then they're released in warmer waters because it's helpful to get them back down into the Gulf of Mexico as quickly as they can.
That is fascinating and extensive. There is so much involved.
Yeah, it's a big collaboration between NOAA and Mass Audubon Wellfleet Bay and Turtles Fly 2, who are flying the turtles, and then of course the New England Aquarium and the National Marine Life Center in Buzzards Bay as well will do some rehab. So there's a lot of different organizations, and it's a federally protected species, so there's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes.
Speaking of species, so the Kemp's Ridley sea turtles, are those the only sea turtles on Cape Cod that you focus on, that you rescue?
So they're actually not. There's 4 species of turtles that come into the Gulf of Maine in the summertime. We have the Kemp's Ridley, the loggerhead sea turtle, the green sea turtle, and then the leatherback sea turtle, which is the largest sea turtle in the world. And so there's 4 species in the summer, but only 3 of them cold stun. And that's because if you think about reptiles, they're exothermic, so their internal temperature relies on their external environment. And since they're marine reptiles, that external environment is the water temperature. So greens, loggerheads, and ridleys are all really dependent on that water temp, whereas leatherbacks, they're so big that they technically have something called gigantothermy, which means just because of the amount of mass, they have a tiny bit of blubber actually, which helps insulate them, so they're able to get out of Cape Cod Bay in time before it gets too cold. Whereas all these other species, the ridley, which makes up about, even though they're the most endangered species in the world, there we see 85 to 90% of all the turtles we're rescuing in the winter are Kemp's ridley, and they're in that juvenile age class between like 2 and 5 years old. So again, about dinner plate size. But those are the 3 species that we are rescuing in the cold sun season, and again, 85 to 90% are Kemp's ridley, and then we get a number of greens and a number of loggerheads too. And it is interesting because as the season goes on, it generally starts mid-November. Once Thanksgiving comes around, it gets pretty busy, and then it'll go through December. And we're still getting turtles into January, but most of them are dead at that point just because they've been floating out there for so long and it's been cold. So it really depends on how many volunteers we have to get to those turtles as quickly as possible. And of course, the wind cooperating, because the wind is really what's pushing these turtles in. But the larger turtles, which are normally loggerheads, still juvenile, sometimes subadult. We had one last year that was 190 pounds. No, 120. We had one last year that was 129 pounds. That was a loggerhead. But the loggerheads, for whatever reason, are coming in a little bit later, towards like December, just because they're sort of larger, and I guess they don't become completely immobile as quickly as the smaller turtles do.
Could I hold up a very, very Ridley turtle,
Yeah.
which the 3 of us made, and my granddaughter colored it, just to give people I don't know how accurate.
That's a pretty good, pretty. It's to scale, definitely.
Okay. Crude, but maybe fairly accurate to scale.
So for my last question to you, how is climate change impacting these turtles and these rescue efforts?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say the biggest influence that climate change is having on the amount of turtles that we're seeing stranding in the wintertime is sort of, you have to think about it in a yearly cycle, where the Gulf of Maine is one of the fastest warming bodies of water in the world. So every summer, its maximum temperature is getting a little bit higher. And these turtles, like I said before, they're looking for warm water because if the water is warm, they can be active, they can feed, they can swim around, they're living life to the fullest. So even though they're coming from Mexico, um, and most of them spend most of their time in the Gulf of Mexico, some of these juveniles, Kemp's Ridleys in particular, will sort of aggregate around large clumps of Sargasso seaweed, and that seaweed will get into the Gulf Stream, and they'll go up the East Coast around Florida and end up in the North Atlantic in the Gulf of Maine. And in the summertime, that's totally fine because it's warm and it's warming every year. So they're going farther and farther north, eventually passing the hook of Cape Cod. And once they pass the hook of Cape Cod, they're pretty much trapped because when fall comes around and the water temp starts dropping, these juvenile turtles that have never been here before are hugging the shallower water along the coast, and they started to swim south because the deeper water is cooler. So they're swimming south along the shore, coming down, and they end up in Cape Cod Bay. And they don't want to swim deep or go north because it's too cold, even though that's pretty much the only way to get out of Cape Cod Bay. So it's pretty much once they pass Provincetown, Herring Cove Beach, they're pretty much going to strand in Cape Cod Bay, and that's on one side of things why climate change is affecting how many turtles we're seeing. Bob Prescott, who found the first cold stone sea turtle in 1974 in Brewster, he found one turtle that year, I believe. And then, the next 10, 20 years, there was between 5 and 30, 40 turtles stranding. 2014 hits, 20, 30 years later, we have 1,200 turtles. We don't know what to do with them. Now we're getting between 500 and 1,200 in 2014 in the last 10 years. So I mean, last year we had 822. The year before that we had just under 700. 2020 we had 1,100 turtles stranding. So there's been this drastic increase just in the last couple decades, which is really due to one, climate change and more turtles coming up here, but also you have to think about the nest protection efforts happening in Mexico and more juveniles being in the system and then inevitably coming up here. Thankfully, our volunteer effort has grown a lot, from just Bob Prescott finding one turtle by himself and driving it to the aquarium to over 200 volunteers going out every high tide when the wind is blowing and we're expecting turtles from November until January and rescuing hundreds of turtles. Again, this is pretty much an entirely volunteer run program. We do have staff, but the staff's job is mostly responding to turtles once they're found. Banana boxes are all donations. The towels we use are all donations. So the best way anyone can help is to make a donation to Wellfleet Bay Wildlife Sanctuary. And if you're interested in volunteering, we do take volunteers. It's important to live on Cape. It's helpful to know the Bayside beaches. We do have like a vetting process. If you're interested in sea turtles and interested in helping, definitely reach out. We'd really appreciate it.
One last question, since you mentioned the turtles are tagged once they're found, and I love if anyone has any experience with this, but is there a tracker that people can go to see where these turtles are?
There is a tracker, and I think it's actually important to mention that, to my knowledge, there's 3 different types of tags that the aquarium will attach to turtles based on various criteria and funding. There's the pit tag, which is a super small microchip that's basically a name tag. So it doesn't give you any location information or anything. It's just if that turtle is found again, you know who that turtle is, and then you can sort of look up its history and figure out where it came from. There's also acoustic tags, which I don't know if anyone has the shark app, which sort of tells you where sharks are. When a shark passes by a buoy, it'll ping and tell you that that shark was in that area. It's the same thing for these turtles. So there's various buoys. They're receiving acoustic sound waves in the water, and those turtles, when they pass a buoy, it will ping, so you can sort of track where it goes. And then the most expensive tag is a satellite tag, which gives you the most information because it goes on the carapace of the turtle. And there's all these aerodynamic requirements that the aquarium is really good at following so that it doesn't adhere in the turtle's swimming ability, but it's basically an antenna on the top of the turtle that pings a satellite and gives you a live feed of where that turtle is going so you can track it as it's moving south. And the aquarium does have a live sea turtle tracker on their website that you can find. Um, and it's pretty cool because you can see where turtles are and they give them unique names every year. And it's cool to follow them and see how far south they're going and actually watch them make it back home.
I'm going to put a link to the tracker in the description if anyone wants to check it out. So before I wrap up, does anyone else have anything that they would like to share?
Could I just thank again everyone who helped us so much in the writing of this book, from volunteers to people at the aquarium to people at Wellfleet. There were volunteer aquarium hospital workers who spent, I talked to one for about an hour asking questions. So everyone seems to care so much about the turtles that they were so willing to help. And I just want to express our gratitude, especially also to Jeanette, who was in Wellfleet and answered every question. I'm sorry that she passed away, but she was a big part of this book too.
And just to add to that, thank you to Heather, to the people, to Eamon, for all of the people who are working to save these turtles.
Okay, and for our viewers at home, what can adults and children do to help these cold-stunned turtles?
Well, the things we mentioned earlier, some of them, but specifically what Eamon said about donating to Wellfleet, learning more about it, becoming aware, being the kind of activist that Jackie was talking about, being aware of small things you can do that make a difference, such as what we said about plastic straws, trying not to use them, using reusable bags, and then the things Liza was talking about that we can all do to try to help reduce the climate change, such as conserving energy.
One fun thing that kids could do is start a turtle club. Just a club to learn about turtles. Learn no matter where you live. If you live next to me in Iowa, you can still learn about turtles and have turtle days, which sounds really fun to me. I would be part of a turtle club.
Before we wrap up, I want to check in with our audience to see if anybody caught the answer to the question from the beginning. And our question again was, what do the turtles have to do before they get solid food? Did you get it? Eamon, what was it?
Poop.
Yes, the turtles have to poop. Well, thank you all so much for joining us and having this insightful discussion about sea turtles and the conservation efforts. To our viewers, Turtles Heading Home is a fantastic resource for learning more about these important efforts, and what you can do. And I hope you found today's conversation as inspiring as I did. A big thank you again to our lovely speakers, and thank you to everyone for watching.